Hello everyone and welcome to this new video where I answer your questions about Blender. Today we are going to help Brickthing, who downloaded this beautiful doomstalker. But this model needs to be modified a little. Because it has a slight problem, it is bigger than the original model. So we could have simply scaled all parts within a slicer. But Brickthing would keep legs as they are. So we can only scale the upper part to match the whole model to the official miniature's height. So let's do that. First, we're going to import all the files into Blender. And we're lucky. All parts are lining up correctly. This is a huge save of time. Then we will set units and the scale. So we go to the 5th tab of the Properties editor, and in Units, we set the scale to 1000. So Blender's scale will match most slicer scale, and we ask Blender to display units in millimeters. Then, let's take a look at the official miniature, which is 15.8 centimeters tall, including the base. So let's model a base, with a cylinder with a diameter of 90 millimeters. Pay attention, Blender asks us to set a radius, so we need to divide 90 by 2, so 45 millimeters. The height of the base is 4 millimeters, and here you go. And then we position the miniature on the base by moving the whole model so the legs slightly touch the ground like that. Okay, now we are going to model our 158 millimeters reference. So I create a 158 millimeters plane. I place it in the background by moving it along y-axis, and then I will place the bottom of the reference at the bottom of the base. So for that we can use snapping. First I check that snapping is set to vertices, then I check that we are using closest mode, which means that Blender will snap closest vertices together. And now, by moving our reference along z-axis, and by holding down the Control key to enable snapping, I can position the bottom of my reference exactly at the bottom of the base. Okay, we are almost ready to scale the model. But what object should we scale? Here we can see that the slot between the top and the bottom of this model is done using a thread, which is a brilliant idea by the way, but it prevents us from deforming this object, because if we do it, bolt and nut will no longer match together. So what we're going to do is split the object in two, and we're only going to scale the upper part. So to do that, I switch to isolation mode with the slash key, I switch to edit mode with the tab key, I switch to face selection mode with the 3 key, and then, with a side view, and in transparency mode using the Alt-Z keys, I select all the faces of the upper part. You can increase the face selection with Ctrl+, and reduce it with Ctrl-. Okay, now we will extract these faces from the object with the P key, and we choose separate selection. So now we have 2 separate objects. I'm going to hide the upper one with the H key for now, and we see that now this object have a hole. So I go back to edit mode with the tab key, I select the edge loop by holding Alt, and by clicking on one of the edge, and I fill the hole with the fill tool whose shortcut is F. I do the same thing with the upper part, so Alt-H to unhide it, and I hide the lower with H. Then I go into edit mode, I select the whole edge loop by selecting any edge of the loop while holding Alt key. And then I can close the loop with the F key. Okay, we're ready to scale. So I select the whole upper part and perform a uniform scale with S key. But there, we can see that the pivot point isn't ideally placed. The scale is done from the center, and it would be much better to do it from the bottom of the selection, to keep the bottom of the selection attached to the lower part of the miniature. So what we're going to do is place our 3D cursor at the bottom. So for that I select the lowest object, I switch to edit mode, I select the lowest face, and with Shift S, I ask Blender to position the 3D cursor on the selection pivot point. And now if I leave edit mode, select the whole upper part again, and position the pivot point at the 3D cursor with semicolon key, I can scale the whole selected object from the bottom, so the transformation will keep scaled object attached to the bottom. So what we have to do now is just set a side view, zoom in a little bit to see our reference well, and we gently adjust the scale. For that we can hold the Shift key, and that will slow down the transformation to set the scale smoothly. And here we are. The height of our model is now 158 millimeter, including the base. Okay, now what's next to do? This model is supplied with supports. So it would be a shame to export the deformed parts, because we would have to create all the supports again. So what we can do is simply note the scale value, which here is 66.1%, and then, when printing the upper parts, we simply apply a 66.1% scale to all upper parts. So not this one, neither this one. Let me just remove lower part from the bed. I think this one is also a lower part. And okay. So now let's select all the upper parts and apply a 66.1% scale. On the other hand, we have modified this part, the joint part with the screw. So for this part, we won't have no other choice than to create supports again. So, back to Blender, I select the two objects, the upper and lower part. I isolate them with /key, and I'm going to merge them in a single object. For that I make sure that one of the two is the active element, and with Ctrl-J, J for join, I merge the two objects. And then we can export it by calling it something like turret rod modified. And then we will have to import it into the slicer and create supports only for this object. And that's all for this video. I hope it will be useful to many of you, and I'll see you very soon.